Wolf Blood by McNeill. The Wolf Hold. The name conjured up the tales Skalds told of when uplanders first saw Asaheim's towering fortress of black rock. Hewn from the ancient bones of Fenris, the Fang dominated the snowbound wilderness for 1,000 leagues in all directions. Radia Finnwulf knew the Wolf Hold did not meet that expectation, not by a long way. A bleak fastness of crumbling stone and rusted steel locked to the side of a sullen mountain. It could not compare to the Fang's towering immensity. Through frost-rimmed armor glass he watched the frozen landscape flash below as Arngir Halfmund guided the Stormfang gunship fast and low over Arcona's polar ice. "Blue ice," he said as the Iron Priest skimmed the glaciers and hugged the mist-shrouded peaks at the top of the world. "This land has deep roots." "Not like Fenris," said Arngir, flexing the metal of his augmented right hand on the controls, where the ice will crush continents and swallow entire tribes in a single night. Radia nodded. "Aye, this land knows permanence." "You have been here before, Wolf Priest?" "Once," said Radia, his mood darkening and his gauntlet tightening on the leather-wound haft of his skull-topped maul. "A century ago. It is a red memory, but not a good one." "The curse?" "Aye, Arngir Halfmund," said Radia, pulling the lacquered leather mask down over his melancholy features. "But do not ask me of those who fell to it. Some tales grow more painful with every retelling." "As you wish," said Arngir. "But tell me one thing." "What?" "If this world brings out the curse, why do we return?" "Because Lehman Russ swore we always would," said Radia. Gunvaldr Svarstraska and his wolves were waiting as Radia and Arngir disembarked onto a frosted platform in the lee of the Wolf Hold's main bastion. Almost twice the height of the Wolf Guard, Gunvaldr's dreadnought chassis was frost blue and gunmetal grey. One arm was a four-bladed fist, the other a perforated, heat-blued multi-melter. The thick, dappled black hide of a thunderwolf slain and skinned by Gunvaldr in his youth draped his claw arm, and the bronze knotwork adorning his scarred, dented sarcophagus was the work of a master artificer. Both his attendant wolves were frost-white, with eyes of palest blue and skulls half encased in cybernetics. Their steel-jacketed fangs were bared, and their hackles were raised. "Welcome to the Wolfhold, brother Finnwulf," said Gunvaldr. "My brother yet slumbers below, but he will wake when he hears of your arrival." "Your 8 brothers are glad to see you," answered Radia. "Your wolves seem less sure of that welcome," said Arngir. "Ah, ignore them, Iron Priest," said Gunvaldr. "This world brings out the blood core in us all." The dreadnought turned back to Radia. "Tell me, Wolf Priest, have you brought untempered flesh in need of this old warrior's guidance?" "I have," said Radia, as 8 swaggering bloodclaws in gleaming battleplate marched from the Stormfang's belly. "An ill-tempered pack, sorely in need of beating into shape." Gunvaldr's fist clenched, and his augmentus crackled with laughter that cut through Radia like a winter's wind. "Then they have come to the right place." Solvo Guthrika's fist cracked hard into Skyraka's Skamlos's cheek, sending him crashing into the rocks of the cliff. The furious Bloodclaw stepped in for a second strike, but there was no need. Skamlas wasn't going to be getting up in a hurry. "By the All-Father, I think you killed him," said Trig Fishhalfer, bending to the fallen youth. Arngir Halfmund pushed the kneeling Bloodclaw away and took the unconscious Stirok's chin in his augmented fist. "He's alive," said the Iron Priest, "but I've half a mind to kill him anyway for going down so easily." "Solva hits hard," said Vicar Snarehunter, the only one of their number not to be wearing his helm. The intense cold of the high peak seemed not to bother the youth, a side effect of the Canis Helix, suspected Rada, one that rendered him all but immune to extremes of temperature. What other side effects might he have? 3 weeks of intense training in the mountains, and tempers had been fraying with each passing moment. Heated words were traded every hour, and Rada was only surprised it had taken the pack this long to turn on one another. This world does not want us here. The very air was anathema, stoking discord and unrest in their souls. Even Rada felt it, his legendary patience fraying at the Bloodclaw's lack of discipline. Arcona was not a world suited to the temperament of wolves. On more than one occasion he'd had to hold his temper and fist in check. Memories of half-heard tales whispered around low-burning fires kept him from lashing out. Tales of 8 brothers who had been on Arcona too long, and the bloodshed they had unleashed. Every day spent on this planet made them more susceptible to the curse woven into the very fabric of their gene-sized legacy. Trig said, at Soliver's naming, the Scards sang how he bore every block of masonry in his father's hearth-hall upon his back. Rada remembered that tale, and looking at Soliver's powerful form, he could well believe it. The battle hunger was ebbing from the young warrior, and he shook off his earlier fury. A blow like that and he'll be as ugly as Otir, said Trig, the bastard son of an Askamani chieftain, a lanky youth who'd been forced to fight tooth and nail for every scrap of food from his father's table. Lothier Hookbeard's face was obscured by his helm, but Rada knew Trig's comment wasn't far from the mark. A brawler with a fiery temper, Lothier had taken more than his fair share of blows over the years, and was notoriously ugly. None are as ugly as me, said Lothier, fiercely proud of his battle scars and battered features. Steercar Scamlouse groaned and pushed himself up onto his elbows. He rubbed a hand over his jaw and blinked away the after effects of Soliver's blow. Did Brother Gunvarder hit me? He said. No, said Soliver Guthrakir, offering his hand. I did. Why? I don't remember, said Soliver. Strange, replied Steercar. Neither do I. Bloodclaws, said Arngeir Halfmund. Only they would start a fight and forget why. More than ever, Radia wanted to be done with this world. Whatever buried hate was making them turn on one another was growing stronger, and was only a matter of time until one of them drew real blood. Before he could answer Arngeir, his helm vox chimed with an incoming transmission. Brother Gunvarder, said Rada, is something amiss? Aye, Wolf Priest, something's amiss, said Gunvarder, his booming, augmented voice undiminished over the vox. Get your squabbling whelps back to the Stormfang. Our training session is complete, said Radia. Their training is over, said the Dreadnought. We have an enemy to slay. What enemy? Orcs, spat the Dreadnought. The refinery was on fire. Radia had smelled the burning promethium from 50 kilometers out. Not long after, he'd smelled the orcs. Even a burning refinery couldn't mask the unclean smell of the greenskins. 5 kilometers out, he saw the smoke and the ember undersides of the chem-stained clouds as they roiled over the Imperial facility. A minute later, they were circling the burning complex, tangled, asymmetrical congeries of steel pipes, towers and silos, spherical reactors, and blocky, Mechanicus-stamped forge temples. A raging battle between the greenskins and a host of mortal soldiers was being fought amid the flames. Thousands of orcs were on the rampage, wreaking bloody havoc on the Arcona and Institute Skitari defending the site. They're losing, said Arngeir, launching the gunship's Stormstrike missiles into the host with uncanny precision. Explosions pounded through the orcs, leaving the structures on either side untouched by the blasts. Fine strikes, said Radia. The Iron Priest's augmented hand clenched into a fist as he watched the orcs burn. It's not enough. The greenskins are too numerous. Radia had already reached that conclusion. The Orc forces numbered in the thousands, howling warriors, stomping war machines, and wildly careening vehicles. A rabble of a host, sneered Lothier Hookbeard. So it appears to the untutored eye of youth, said Radia. But I have fought the greenskins more than any warrior here, and you are mistaken. This horde has a master, and without him the rest will fall to disorder. So we find this master and slay him, roared Vicar Snarehunter, grasping the hilt of his chainsword. Aye, that we will, promised Radia. Then we'll need to hurry, said Arngeir Halfmund, angling the Stormfang's prow towards the refinery. The aircraft's frame shuddered as the Iron Priest unleashed a storm of mass-reactive shells from the heavy bolters. Bones of Russ, said Radia, seeing what Arngeir had seen. A towering warlord at the front of the horde, monstrously powerful and scaffolded in a smoke-belching frame of mechanized armor that encased its enormous body. Easily the biggest orc Radia had ever seen. It bore a roaring cleaver blade on one arm and thundering cannon upon the other. And crashing through the horde towards the warlord were 2 frost-white wolves and a howling dreadnought. Take us down, Arngeir, ordered Radia. Take us down now! The storm strikes had created a landing zone, and salvos of heavy bolter fire tore up any orc weapon teams looking to bring the gunship down in its terminal maneuver. Howling packs of orcs rushed the descending gunship, blasting wild shots from their junk guns. Impacts spanked the hull like a Fenrisian's shard storm, but the armor was proof against such primitive weapons. The Stormfang came in low and hard, throwing up icy vortices as Arngeir Halfmund held it 2 meters off the ground and brought his most potent weapon to bear. The Hellfrost Destructor was a weapon the Iron Priest spoke of in fearful whispers. They claimed it drew its power from the darkest recesses of the Underverse, a frozen, hollow place even the machine god of Mars feared. An anguished wail built in the belly of the gunship, a tormented shriek torn straight from Hell's maw. The armor-glass plates of the cockpit misted with the mechanized intake of frozen breath. From Hell's heart I stab at thee, he said. A streaming howl of freezing energy roared from the gunship's prow in a blue-white fist of cryo-energy, as cold as the breath of an ice drake from the permafrost glaciers, as merciless as the blizzard of Azerheim. It plummeted the region of the blast to sub-zero temperatures in an instant. Those orcs that weren't instantly encased in ice were flash frozen beyond even their fearsome metabolism's ability to survive. Thermal shock ruptured flesh and iron with equal ease, and roaring vehicles shattered like dirty glass. "Lead them out, Radia Fenwolf," he yelled. "For Russ and the All-Father!" Radia dropped from the gunship, hunkered low and with his skull-top maul held in both hands. The blood claws dropped with him, blades bared and howling like newborn Postvala. "Hold to me," ordered Radia, ducking out from under the Stormfang and racing along its length with the blood claws flanking him. Roiling blasts of toxin-laden mushroom clouds illuminated the cold mist wreathing the gunship, and the ground shook with nearby detonations. Radia smelled reeking propellant and crude fungal explosives. He heard muffled warshouts and the rallying shout of Imperial horns. Shapes moved in the freezing fog surrounding the gunship. Radia put them down with snap-fired blasts of fetish-hung plasma pistol. The blue-hot bolts left voids in the mist, and Radia saw hulking, iron-bulked monsters with flaming grates in their bellies. Anything that could live through a Hellfrost blast was a threat to be taken seriously. He rounded the hovering prow of the Stormfang. The bronze carvings and intakes hung with daggered shards of ice. Even through his runic armor, Radia felt the cold of the Underverse and heard lingering echoes of Hell's spiteful laughter. Glittering idols of frozen greenskins stood arrayed like statuary lining a triumphal way, and the bloodclaws smashed them apart as they charged past. "There," shouted Radir, hearing the thunderous sound of metal on metal and the howling of Frenesian wolves. The mists were thinning, burning away by the heat of the burning refinery, and more orcs were closing on their position, drawn by the prospect of an epic brawl. Hundreds of braying greenskins were fighting to reach them, but the ice of the Hellstorm blast was working in the Space Wolves' favor. Borne to the ice, Radir and the Bloodclaws were as sure-footed as ever, while the orcs slipped and tumbled over one another across the ice-lit ground. With Radir at the tip of the wedge, the Space Wolves carved through the struggling aliens, shooting and hacking a path towards Gunvarda's Foxtrot. Radir vaulted from the icy canyon gouged by the Hellfrost, and the breath caught in his lungs at the sight before him. A sight that could have come straight from Skullgrimson's legendary sagas. Gunvarda's Foxtrot fought the titanic warlord of the Horde, like Boldifur the Warwolf facing the one-armed monster Skadegenga. Surrounded by a host of billowing greenskins, the towering dreadnought was more than matched in size by the ironclad warlord. They hammered body blows against one another, each impact sounding like the beating of the mighty forge hammers in the depths of the Eight. Both of Gunvarda's wolves were dead, one torn in two and discarded like butcher meat, the other riddled with explosive shells and shrapnel. Gunvarda's claw-arm tore at the greenskin's belly armor, sending torn, molten-edged shards of iron flying. In return, the orc's roaring blade carved through the dreadnought's sarcophagus in a plume of orange sparks. "To the old one!" ordered Radir, but the Bloodclaws were already in motion. They smashed into the greenskins with all the fury of a thunderwolf charge. Roaring chain blades hacked greenskin flesh, and close-range mass reactives detonated within their repulsive alien bodies. Radir took the fight to the orcs with his skull-topped maul, bludgeoning the aliens from his path with crushing impacts that split skulls and shattered their crude armor. He howled as though Russ himself fought at his side, exhorting the Bloodclaws to heights of fury they had never known, and never would again. He let the rage take him, like a berserker of old, as he killed the foe with no thought to his own defense. Scores died beneath the thunder of his maul, reduced to broken meat and bone. His armor was slathered in gore to the waist, coated in the enemy's unclean, caustic blood. He heard the shouts of fighting men and women, the percussive vibrations of explosions, and the howling roar of the orcs. Rotary cannons blazed somewhere nearby, and the snap of lasguns filled the air with fizzing bolts of crimson light. Then he heard it. A stricken howl, as pained and as bitter as though ripped from the twin throats of Morkai himself. Radir blinked away from the red haze of slaughter, drawing a hot breath into his lungs, as he saw something he never dreamed he might see. Gunvarda's Foxtrot crashed to the ground. His claw-arm ripped from its shoulder mount, and one leg buckled to ruin. The monstrous greenskin warlord stood triumphant, with one enormous foot planted on the dreadnought's ash-stained body. "No!" bellowed Radir, as the warlord's screaming cleaver finally punched through the sundered sarcophagus. A geysering spray of frothed pink, amniotic fluids gushed from the wound, and Gunvarda's Foxtrot's thread was abruptly cut. Radir vaulted from the back of a fallen greenskin, swinging his maul like a felling axe at the warlord's iron-jawed head. His aim was true, his mind's eye already seeing the utter destruction of his enemy's skull. Its arc complete, the maul slammed home, and shattered into fragments as a blazing green aura of energy exploded around the warlord. Radir tasted blood and metal as he was hurled back by the blast. He slammed down hard and skidded over the ice, tumbling as he tasted the burned ruin of his flesh. He spat blood, feeling heat gather within his chest as his gene-enhanced body fought to reknit itself. His arm was broken into shards, and flashing runes on his visor told a grim tale of armor breaches and organ failure on a massive scale. "What in the name of Frankie and Kerry?" He looked up, to see a hunched orc swathed in rags and bearing a bent copper staff. Bursts of green corpuscent flickered and writhed around the creature, and its manic grin was that of a lunatic zealot. Its staff burned hot with green fire, and it turned that abhorrent power on the blood claws. Trig Vishhalfer vanished in a stream of coruscating psychic fire. His armor peeled back like cinders in a hurricane. His flesh melted an instant later, searing from his bones like melted wax. Lottier Hookbeard followed him to the Allfather's side a second later, his body wreathed in emerald light and crushed as if by an invisible fist. "Maleficarum," hissed Raldo, struggling to regain his feet. One of his legs was broken, the other a burnt shank of fused bone and seared flesh. Rough hands hauled him to his feet, and he saw Steerkar Scamlos and Vikar Snarehunter either side of him. "I can stand, damn you!" he barked. They nodded and released him. The pain was immense, tearing at the barriers erected by his battleplate's restorative systems. The sounds of battle swelled around him, a deafening cacophony of war that only greenskins could make. Destruction for destruction's sake. War for the sheer joy of the fight. Raldir turned in a slow circle, seeing only an unbroken wall of bloodthirsty orcs, barking a guttural sound over and over. "What is that?" said Steerkar. "A war chant?" Years of fighting the greenskins had given Raldir a rudimentary understanding of their grunting language, and he shook his head. "No, it is their warlord's name," he said. "The nearest translation is Scarblitz." Vikar spat on the ground, helmetless once again. "What happened to Solvor?" he asked, hefting the chainsword and rolling his shoulders. "Dead," said Steerkar in disgust. "Defiled." The fury that had all but blinded Raldir earlier returned. He drew his plasma pistol as the warlord turned to face them, and looked into eyes that were the red of coals plucked from the Ironfather's furnace. The creature still held Gunvada Strastika's claw arm, and over its shoulder were draped the disemboweled corpses of his frost-pelted wolves. How could any warrior stand against such a foe and live? Raldir shook off such unworthy thoughts. This would be a death any warrior ought to relish. A good death would earn a warrior a place at the Allfather's side when Lemon Russ returned for the wolf time. Such an ending was to be sought. His helmvox spat static. "Brother Raldir," called Arngir Halfmund aboard the Stormwolf. "Hold firm, I am coming about for an extraction." "Do not," replied Raldir. "I can—" "No," repeated Raldir, "for we are already dead, and I will not see your thread cut with ours." "I will not abandon you." "You must. Fly to the wolf horde," said Raldir. "Wake Gunvada Strastika's brother, then bear word of what has happened here to Fenris." I cannot leave." "Do as I order, Arngir Halfmund," yelled Raldir, as the greenskin warlord raised Gunvada's splintered dreadnought arm to the sky and loosed an earth-shattering bellow of primal rage. "Return to Arcona and our brothers," said Raldir, taking aim at the warlord, as the massive greenskins charged with their master's name bellowing from every tusked jaw. "Return and avenge us."